So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. Has anyone ever heard this quote? Seeing is believing? You sure you've heard it? What does it mean? You've got to see it to believe it. What else does it mean? If you can't see it, you don't believe it, but also means once you see it, you believe it. So before you even thought about it, once you see something, you start to believe in it. So it actually means two things. You're not going to believe it until you see it, and if you've seen it, now you believe it. So it's actually working two ways. How about this? Have you heard of Abraham Maslow and Maslow's hammer? If the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. What does that mean? What do you think? So we don't necessarily always approach what we need to approach in the way it needs to be approached because we only have certain tools to approach things with. So this, for us as human beings on this planet, means we were raised with a certain tool set by our parents, by our school system, by our counselors, by our mentors. And we only have that tool set to approach the various issues we're going to find in life. But that might not be the best tool set for whatever situation we're currently looking at. So sometimes we're approaching a screw and we've got a hammer. We were never given a screwdriver, we've got a hammer. So we do the best we can with what we got, but it's really not the best tool for the situation. Following me? All right, so I need to establish some of these baseline concepts to move on here. So let's get on to one of the great mystics, brilliant minds of unity that helped start this movement, H. Emily Cady, in our foundational text, Lessons in Truth. She lays out this scenario. She says, suppose that a dozen persons are standing on the dark side of a wall, which are various sized openings. So visualize this with me. Right behind me is an entirely black wall, but there's some holes cut in this wall of various sizes. All right, that's basically what she's saying. She says, viewing the scene outside through the opening assigned to him, one sees all there is within a certain radius. So depending on where you are at the wall and how big the opening is in the wall, that's all you're going to see of what's happening on the other side. Following me? So it kind of would look like this. One person's looking through this small little opening and says, that's the sun. We're all talking about the sun. We're all looking at the same thing. We're all looking at the sun. But the person next to him goes, no. That's a lake. We're talking about water. We're talking about kayaking. We're talking about canoeing. We're talking about a lake and all the things that have to do with a lake. But the person next to them goes, no. We're talking about a cabin because we're all staring at a cabin. So this is about off-grid living. This is about composting toilets. This is about solar panels. And all three of them are arguing with each other about what we're actually talking about. Because each one of them assumes we're looking at the same thing. But the only one who sees the whole picture is God. The only thing that knows what's actually going on the other side of that wall is God. Each person standing and looking through that tiny little aperture is only seeing a tiny aspect of what is happening, but assumes they see it all. And so they can stand there and argue with each other that the other one is ignorant and wrong because they're not seeing the world the way it is. So she closes out her story by saying, the fact is each one looking at the same world sees according to the size of the aperture through which he is looking, and he limits the world to just his own circumscribed view of it. You would say at once that such limitation was only a mark of each man's ignorance and narrowness. So now I can sit here and I can judge you because you don't know what you're looking at. I know what I'm looking at. I'm staring through my little aperture. I see the world the way it is. So now I can judge you for not seeing the world correctly. And I'm going to actually call you narrow-minded and ignorant because you don't see the world the way it is. When the reality is, the only thing that actually has any clue what's going on is God. And the remarkability of it all is that we actually think we see things the way they are. Can everybody just get humble for a second and just say, I don't know? Say it with me. I don't know. What's happening in the world today? I don't have a clue. If you think you know what's going on in the world today, it's time to check your ego at the door. You don't have a clue. None of us do. Only God has even the faintest idea of what is happening today. So what we think is wrong with the world is simply a product of how we view the world. What we think is wrong with the world is simply a product of how we view the world. It's simply a product of this microscopic little hole we're looking through that we judge the world through and determine that this is the way things are. So what does that mean? We have built a belief system for our life based on false information or a lack of the whole picture. But the assumption is that we are seeing the whole picture. And so as I've toyed with this life on my own spiritual journey, with my own battle, with my own ego, with my own perception that I see things the way they are, even as a child of unity, surely unity is the best religion out there, so I've got the right thing here. Now I can judge other religions based on they're on the wrong path. They don't get it. So as I've talked about this, I've looked at this, I've talked to other people about this, I've analyzed this, I've seen it as a pendulum. We're all living on this pendulum of perspective. And somewhere on the pendulum of perspective is where we sort of lay our claim. And on the pendulum of perspective, we always have the far left, we have the far right. We have the extremes on both sides, and we have what appears to be the center of that pendulum. But here's the fascinating thing about it. Even if I am a little off-center or a fair amount off-center or whatever topic we're talking about, I perceive that to be the center. Hold on to this now. Don't let me lose you here. If this is the center, and in reality I'm kind of over here with where I believe this issue is, I actually think I'm in the center. No matter where I am on this pendulum, either side, I actually think I'm in the center, regardless of the issue. And when I stand in the center, I think where I am is normal, natural, and the way it should be. And anyone that's not standing where I am is not normal, not natural, and not where they should be. Guess what? The person standing on the other side of this topic, on the other side of center, guess what? They also think they're standing in the center. And guess what they believe? Where they are standing is normal, is natural, and the way it should be. And they're looking at me over on the other side and saying, you're abnormal, you're unnatural, and you're not where you should be. Are you starting to catch on what's happening in the world today? Why we're so divided? It's not that we think any differently really than we did historically. It's that we actually believe we're right now. We've lost the humility to simply go, I've got a perspective, you've got a perspective, we both have no clue what's going on, let's just talk and have fun. Realizing neither one of us is right, and neither one of us needs to win an argument, because there is no argument to win. Only God has any clue what's going on, and both of us are completely ignorant. And that just feels good. To let go that I actually might be right. Well, the fascinating thing is now you have people out on the extremes, the far extremes. Do they believe they're in the center? Well, for them, things are a little bit different. Because actually where they're standing, there's no one off to the other side of them. So they don't actually think they're in the center, because everyone's now over here on one side of them. So what they believe is, everyone else has gone mad and lost touch with reality, so I must fight to get things back to normal. Standing at the extreme, they believe they've got to fight because the entire world has lost its way to get things back to normal. And the person on the exact opposite side believes the exact opposite thing. They must fight to get things back to normal. And it would be easy to sort of cut those extremes off and say, well, those are the far extremes, they don't get it. But sometimes it's been those people in the far extremes that have actually righted the course of the world when it's been off course. Like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There was a good group of society that said that person's out of control, they are a far extreme, but yet, no, they were right. We were all off course. They did have to fight to try to get us back to center, and we're still trying to get back to center. So I guess I'm trying to say is, life's complicated. And our little tiny mind does everything it can to try to simplify it for us. And to say, don't worry, there's one perspective, it's yours, and you're right. Everyone else is wrong. You're safe. You actually got the right solution. You did it. Congratulations, Shad. You're the only right one in the world. So wherever you stand on the pendulum of perspective, you will find truth and facts to support your perspective. Now is when I'm going to probably bother some of you. You have an opinion that you have fought very hard for. So hard that you've gone off on the internet and you've found whatever factoids you need to support your opinion. You've listened to whatever news outlet is speaking to your specific opinion so you can lay your claim that I have found truth because I've got facts. I've got factoids that support my opinion. I've got the truth. And everyone has done the exact same thing. They've gone to their sources to get the facts they need to support their opinion. And again, that little tiny brain is telling us, but your facts are actually the correct ones. Your facts are the only real ones. They're backed by science. Well, the other person also has facts backed by science. And believe it or not, science isn't the science we once thought it was. You can pretty much find a study today to say anything you want it to say. Like you can grab any page from the Bible and get it to say anything you want it to say. You're going to have to read the entire thing to get the gist. Like seeing God's view. So I hate to break it to you, all the little facts you've gathered to make your case, to make your point true for you, are just as truthful or incorrect as the person on the opposing side of this topic. Is anyone feeling bothered yet? Your silence is a yes. Let's keep going. Let's see how much more we can get bothered. So now we have a world that's saying there's facts, there's disinformation, and there's misinformation. And we must now decide what is information, what is not information, what is disinformation. Here's what concerns me. Who establishes what is truth or fact? Do you trust anyone in government to be of such a high spiritual awareness that they could determine what is truth and fact in the world today? Anyone? Anyone? Do you trust any gathering of people of any sort to be established for all of us what truth is and what fact is in the world today? Unless it's a gathering of like the 6 enlightened masters of the planet that lived, I'd be highly suspect and concerned that there's an agenda. Because we all have an agenda. And this is where it gets a little interesting for us in Unity, because we do recognize that there is something different between truth and truth. Truth with a lowercase t means this truth, the physical truth, the ego-centered truth. And the truth with a capital T is the divine truth, the unchanging truth, the unwavering truth, the untouchable truth. It is God's truth. I can have a truth, a little t, that's true for today, but it might change tomorrow based on what I had for breakfast. But God's divine truth does not change. So a good example for this is love. When we talk about love, you can have love with a lowercase l. You can fall in love. You can fall out of love. You can love someone one day. You can hate him the next day. But divine love with a capital L is unwavering. It is unchanging. God's love does not ever change. Regardless of what you've done, God's love never changes. It is changeless. So now we realize all of us in the physical existence are just dealing with lowercase t little truth. That's all we've got. We're attempting to get in touch with divine truth through prayer and meditation and spiritual practice, but all we're debating about is little truth, which comes and goes based on perceptions and agendas and thought systems. So co-founder of the Unity Movement, Charles Fillmore, he said, the eyes are the perceptive faculty of mind, and unless the perception is established in truth, with a capital T, one sees or perceives duality. When one delights in knowledge that is less than truth, one's capacity to receive inspiration direct from divine mind, which you might call God mind, is lessened or lost. This is the really fascinating thing he's saying here. It's one thing to actually believe in the little truth. What he's saying is the more you believe in that, the less able you are to get in touch with divine truth. The more you believe in your little perception of life, the less capable you are to be exposed to other possibilities. We've all seen that be true, right? When someone so buys into their belief system, they can't hear any other possibility. And he's pointing that out. That even means you're cutting yourself off from God. The more you believe that you actually see the world the way it is, the more you're cutting yourself off from God. Because God says the world is complex and messy. It's not as clear as your mind's trying to make it. So our other co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, said this is double-mindedness, which consists in believing in evil as well as in good. In perceiving and thinking about evil or undesirable conditions or lack or failure or calamity of any sort, double-mindedness weakens the eyes and dims the vision, and we do not clearly perceive that which is our perfection in God's mind. The more you buy into this physical experience and the limitations of it, the less you are able to experience God. So in this world today, we are literally shutting down our capacity to feel and know God by segmenting ourselves into these little silos of what we think are truth and surrounding ourselves just with the other people that agree with us, listening to just the news outlets that agree with us, and just going to the web pages that agree with us so we can further entrench ourselves in this tiny little myopic perception of the world, not even realize we've cut off God from our lives. Because God is an infinite amount of perceptions and perspectives and viewpoints. So this is Unity Basic Principle number 3. We create our life experiences through our way of thinking. So not only that, the more you believe this is the way the world is, guess what? The more you will see that as the way the world is. And the more the world will actually show up in your life that way. If you have this doom and gloom mentality that we're just going to lose the planet and everyone's going to go up in flames and we're all going to be lost, well, you're going to start seeing evidence of that. But you see people that have this positive mindset and they only see joy, and you go, did you hear about the news today? And they're like, no, I didn't. And then we go, oh, that person's crazy. They should be more miserable like the rest of us. So most, if not all, of what we perceive to be true resides as a story in our subconscious mind that is built upon years of our limited view of life. You're spending 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years of your life developing an entrenched story that sits in your subconscious mind, which now dictates how you see the world, how you interact with the world, and how you allow the world to show up in front of you. Let me say that again, how you allow the world to show up to you. We want to think we're victims of the world, but the fact is we're the victims of our own story. So this stuff's pretty powerful. So today, as we go through our ministries, as we travel around, my wife and I, Erina, we recognize that there's a perception of what church is supposed to be today. This is the way church is. This is the way it is supposed to be. And we see ministries and centers and churches get entrenched in one way of doing things, in a way that has been done, an old way of doing things. And around them, the world is changing and evolving. And sometimes we just gather the people around us that go, no, this is the way church is supposed to be. And we hold on to something while the river is flowing around us going, actually, there's a lot of more beautiful things happening here and opportunities we could be having if we're willing to open our minds and eyes to see other perspectives, other opportunities, other ways of being. Now, let me make this very personal for me right now. Where I stand as my perceived center, I'm a white, cisgender, heterosexual, middle-class male. That comes with a perspective, that comes with a bias, that comes with a perception and view of the world. If I do not force myself to step somewhere else on the pendulum, I believe that is normal, that is the center, and that is the way things should be. And in fact, I live in a society where that has been built to support that perspective, because it was built by individuals like me to benefit individuals like me and to suppress individuals not like me. And if I do not force myself to see another perspective, to talk to other people unlike me, to move over on the pendulum and see what's going on, I'm actually perpetuating and supporting that system to my own advantage and to the disadvantage of those around me. So the pendulum is there for us to move around a bit, to get some other perspectives, to see what's going on in the world, not to just hunker down and saying, I've got the truth. That's all I need. So my father is a unity minister, and I'm not sure he really ever said anything worthwhile, but he did say this. He didn't say this publicly in a sermon. He actually just turned to me one day and said this in one of those moments where it's just a father looking at his son and saying, you know what? He said, I have lived this life and I have seen a lot, and I've done a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer, and I'm going to tell you, I've discovered that our perception creates our universe. Not just figuratively, he said literally. Each of us lives in our own reality governed by the laws of our own belief. Now, he was not just talking about some things seem to be this way for you. He's talking about you are actually steering gravity according to how you believe gravity exists for you. You are steering the universe to show up in your life and the laws of physics based on how you believe this works. And that would have to be true for Jesus to walk on water. His perception is that water is just a thing, just like land, just like air. The only way Jesus could walk on water if he was actually bending the laws of physics according to his perception. And if he said, greater works you can do than I can do, then sure enough, we also have the power to bend the laws of physics to our perception. And I'm giving you an example of how this shows up to be true. I have a friend that believes beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're always going to get poor service at a restaurant. Does anyone have a friend like this? Guess what happens every time we go out? They get poor service from the exact same person that is serving me at the same table, and my service is perfectly fine. My food's hot, it's the order I asked for, theirs is cold, and it's always wrong. But think about what's happening here. Their belief is so powerful that they're actually affecting the people around them to show up into their universe on how they believe that universe works. Their belief is so powerful they're actually affecting the elements and people around them to show up and vindicate their belief. Do you know how powerful that is? Do you know how much we need to start checking our own thoughts? We're actually creating the universe we live in. So don't yuck somebody else's yum. You have no idea what they've been exposed to. You have no idea what they're going through. You have no idea what their perception is, unless you're willing to step in their shoes for a while and talk to them and learn from them. So Charles Fillmore went on to say, Jesus recognized that the consciousness of man was submerged in the things of sense. So when he says the things of sense, he says, we're just locked into this physical world. We're totally unaware of what's happening spiritually. That it could not perceive the truth in the abstract, that it must, under these conditions, be stirred into activity by some stimulating force dropped into it from without. So here I am, locked into my belief in this pendulum of this physical experience. And he's saying, Jesus recognized, unless something knocks me out of that little spot, I have no chance of even perceiving that there's a whole world out there of beauty and majesty and spirit and God. Hence, he sent forth his powerful words of truth to the thirsty souls and said to them, keep my saying. People like to call Jesus the Prince of Peace, but he didn't call himself that. You know what he said? I did not come to bring peace. I came with a sword. Did you know he said that? He came to stir things up. He came to knock us out of our comfort zone and say, look, people, you don't get it. See what's happening in the world. Challenge yourself. Challenge your thinking. Take your life to task so you can actually experience a little bit of God, which is expressing through each and every one of us in beautiful ways. So go back to this quote from Thomas Fuller. He said, seeing is believing. But as I was researching this talk, lo and behold, that's not the whole quote. The whole quote is actually, seeing is believing, but feeling is truth. Have you ever heard that part of that quote? Why do we always leave off the best part of a quote? Seeing is believing, but feeling is truth. Have you ever been in a debate with someone that you know you're right, but in the moment you don't feel good about what you're doing? Because your feeling, that is your internal moral compass, that is your Christ consciousness, that is God showing up in you, that is Spirit flowing through you saying, will you shut your mouth? You don't know. How about trying to find some common ground with this human being instead of trying to draw lines? How about a shred of humility to say, you know what? I only know what I've been exposed to. Why don't you share with me what you know? And I just want to share one example of this, how this showed up in my life. As a sound engineer, I've worked with a lot of other sound engineers, mixing stadium-sized shows, doing all sorts of stuff. And I worked on a crew at the MGM Grand for a long time with this young man, actually older than me, but young, I knew him at the time. Never said much of anything. And we were always giving each other advice. Oh, you should tweak it that way. You should use this speaker. You should do this thing. He just wouldn't say anything. Finally, I went to a concert, and he was mixing it. And I found out he is the most amazing sound engineer I had ever met in real life. And I went to him like, Brett, you are incredible. Why don't you ever tell the rest of us what we're doing wrong? He's like, man, one time I showed up at a gig, and I corrected this guy on what he was doing, and he was actually right, and I was wrong. And I realized, I don't know what I'm talking about. And ever since then, I realized I'm just going to show up and listen and continually learn. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you where you're wrong or you're right. I'm just here to learn. He said, and I got better, and I got better, and I got better. He said, I have nothing to prove. I'm just here to do my job well. I was like, bing. The most quiet person in the room winds up being the most brilliant person in the room because they're listening. And that is the truth as I experience it. Thank you.